Chapter 15. Produce Great Persons. The Rest Follows. Walt Whitman. House shone his light on the photograph of Pip in the baseball uniform. He could see the resemblance to Pip, the old man. It was in his eyes, in the smile. Aurora angels. "How about that?" he whispered. The Aurora County All-Stars weren't organized, they had no uniforms, and they played only one official game a season. But it didn't matter what color you were. If you were a boy living in Aurora County and you loved the crack of the bat or the feel of the ball or the sound of the wind in your ears as you ran the bases, you could play ball. He stared at all of the photographs. Maybe he was looking right at his mother, somewhere on this wall. What would she have looked like as a girl? Norwood Boyd was so much older than his mother would have been. How did she know him? Questions. He had questions. He opened the tall door to the library and stepped in, the flashlight beam lighting his way. It was an enormous room with high windows facing the front of the house and a long sofa in the middle of the room facing the far wall. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with books. In the past year, House had read 17 books to Norwood Boyd, all of them from this library. Every afternoon when House arrived, he picked up the current book from the nightstand, opened it to the ribboned bookmark that saved their place, and Mr. Norwood would sigh. "Let's see what Long John Silver is up to today," he might say. He would smile when he said it. Then he would settle in and be silent, and House would read for almost an hour until Mr. Norwood Boyd fell asleep. Then he was free to go. Sometimes Pip would arrive when he was reading. Sometimes it would be Miss Mattie. Someone would take his place, and he would go home with the latest chapter of a story in his head. He had begun to look forward to the next chapter as much as Mr. Norwood did. He and Norwood Boyd had shared an unspoken camaraderie in those late afternoon hours. House counted bookcases until he came to the 5th bookcase to the right of the door. He stood on a step stool to reach the 7th shelf. He shone the flashlight across the row of old books until he came to the only green spine. He pulled the book off the shelf and saw that it had a fancy scroll work on the cover. He climbed off the step stool before he would allow himself to read the title by flashlight, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. It looked familiar, but he couldn't place where he might have seen it before. He fished the note out of his pocket and reread the words Mr. Norwood Boyd wrote. "After the dazzle of day is gone, only the dark, dark night shows to my eyes the stars. After the clangor of organ majestic, or chorus, or perfect band, silent athwart my soul moves the symphony true, Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. Your mother gave these words to me, now I give them to you as treasure for the days ahead. Look for me in every atom that you see." House opened the book and looked at the inside front cover. Written in a beautiful, careful script were the words, Elizabeth Jackson. House stared at the signature until he couldn't see anymore. He rubbed his eyes with weariness. It didn't make sense. Symphony true? His mother had said in his dream. She had sung the song to House when he was little. "Moves the symphony true. Listen for that symphony, House," she had said. He listened. He heard nothing. And what should he do now? He considered the situation. An old pug dog slept next to House in Mr. Norwood Boyd's library. An old man had told House a story about baseball that was supposed to mean something, but what? Another old man had died and left House a treasure, a symphony true. And his mother? How did she figure in? A mockingbird sang an insistent song in the tree outside the library windows. House had a half-mile walk back to home. And as he got to his feet, clutching his incomprehensible treasure, he realized something. It would soon be exactly 24 hours to the minute since he had come to Mr. Norwood Boyd's ghostly home in the almost light of yesterday, when he had been awakened by Eudora Weltley. He had followed the dog back to Mr. Norwood Boyd's and found the old man almost dead. He had followed the instructions his father had given him many times, to call Doc McRae if there was ever a problem, and he had taken one last look at Mr. Norwood Boyd. There had been a book at the end of his bed. He made note of it when he would come into the bedroom, but had forgotten about it until now. It had been green with fancy scroll work on the cover. It was the same book he was now holding, Leaves of Grass. A long shiver grabbed House by the shoulders. He looked at the book, and he looked at Eudora. Had she been wearing the note in her collar when she first came to get him? He couldn't remember. He only remembered seeing it when he crouched inside the honeysuckle bush. So how did Eudora get the note in her collar? Like an answer to his question, a body rose from the couch.